There is a phrase that appeared in a Cabarrus Weekly Meteorological Analysis published on April 20th, 2026, describing what is happening to the United States weather pattern this week. And it is a phrase that no professional forecasting outlet uses casually, because the word it contains carries a very specific scientific and historical weight. The phrase is this: meteorologists are describing the current severe weather pattern as a generational and unprecedented outbreak of consecutive severe weather days. Generational. That word does not mean memorable. It does not mean active. It does not mean above average, which is a phrase so overused in modern weather coverage that it has lost all gravitational pull. Generational means that when forecasters working in this field for 20, 25, 30 years sit down at their workstations and look at what the atmosphere has delivered to the American heartland since the first week of March 2026, they are recognizing something that the observational record does not have a robust comparable for. Consider the documented accumulation. Through April 17th, 356 confirmed tornadoes had already touched down in the United States. The NWS Chicago Field Office had issued 128 tornado and severe thunderstorm warnings by April 19th, a record high through that date in any year. The same office had logged 11 individual severe weather events since January 1st, against the historical average of 4. Chicago received 10. 63 inches of rain between March 1st and April 20th, more than double its historical average of 4. 66 inches. And the first time in recorded weather history, the city had exceeded 10 inches in that window. And the atmosphere responsible for all of that, for every broken record, every record flood stage, every EF3 tornado removing a home's exterior walls, every dam brought within 5 inches of structural failure, did not pause for recovery. It was pausing for Monday and Tuesday, and now it is returning. Again, with 3 days of severe weather already outlined for Wednesday through Friday, a tornado threat already identified for Sunday and Monday targeting Arkansas and the Deep South, and analog data placing the Tennessee Valley and broader Dixie Alley corridor at 50 to 70% probability of at least one. Severe weather event between April 24th and 27th, a region forecasters specifically noted that has experienced a mercifully quiet severe weather season so far in 2026, and whose luck is now measurably running out. Begin with the 3 straight days. The SPC's Day 4-8 Outlook published Monday, April 20th, 2026, described the architecture of the returning severe weather with a clarity that is worth tracing carefully. The long wave trough developing across the western United States will persist through the forecast period, supporting a multi-day severe weather threat across portions of the central United States. 3 days. The first day, Wednesday, April 22nd, carries the lowest individual risk, but the significance of Wednesday is not its own intensity. Its significance is what it initiates. As the trough begins approaching the high plains and the dry line sharpens, severe thunderstorms capable of large hail and damaging winds will be possible across portions of the high plains. Wednesday is the atmosphere loading the gun. Forcing for ascent will be strongest in the Nebraska Panhandle and western South Dakota. The NAM guidance is showing 60-degree Fahrenheit dew points as far north as the Texas South Plains and portions of the Panhandle. Wednesday's threat is conditional, lower confidence dependent on dry line sharpening and moisture return timing, but the SPC explicitly outlined it as the opening day of a 3-day severe weather sequence. And in 2026, every time the SPC has described a multi-day sequence, the subsequent days have delivered on the forecast at or above the levels projected. Thursday, April 23rd, is the day that is currently drawing the most attention from the professional forecasting community, and for reasons that the SPC's own forecast discussion describes with unusual technical specificity. A lobe of vorticity will rotate around the closed mid-level low across the northern Rockies, reinforcing a surface cyclone as it moves north into Canada. As that cyclone deepens and tracks northward, a combined dry line and cold front will move east into an increasingly moist environment across the central plains. The air mass ahead of the front will destabilize through Thursday afternoon, with mu-P values exceeding 1,000 joules per kilogram possible into portions of Minnesota. Fox Weather's reporting on this setup identified the threat corridor as stretching from Minneapolis and Des Moines southward through Kansas City, Wichita, and Oklahoma City. A risk zone that encompasses communities across 5 states and covers the same geographic corridor that the April 17th outbreak used as its primary track. The SPC's Day 4-8 discussion described Thursday's storm evolution in 2 distinct phases, and both phases matter equally. The first phase, kinematic fields initially should support supercells, discrete supercells capable of large hail, tornadoes, and the full range of severe hazards, organizing ahead of the front during the afternoon hours. The second phase, mid-level flow will increasingly become parallel to the front, suggesting that storms will grow up scale into 1 or more linear segments. This is the supercell to squall line transition. A dangerous evolution where a storm that was producing tornadoes in discrete supercell mode reorganizes into a fast-moving bow echo or organized squall line capable of generating widespread straight-line wind damage exceeding 80 miles per hour across hundreds of square miles simultaneously. Both threats, same Thursday, same quarter. Already outlined by the SPC 3 days before the event. Thousands of homes and businesses across Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, and Oklahoma are still without power from last week's outbreak when Thursday's storms arrive. The utility crews working to restore that power will be on the roads and on utility poles when the next round comes in. Friday, April 24th, the second major day, takes the threat south and east, and here is where the forecast reveals its most important and least discussed characteristic. The SPC's discussion states that the surface front, augmented by convective outflows from Thursday's storms, will continue pushing south and east into the southern plains and the greater Arklatex region overnight Thursday into Friday before stalling. 2 words. Before stalling. A stalling front is not a front that has finished its work. A stalling front is a front that has parked itself over a region and is holding every atmospheric ingredient in place. The instability, the moisture, the wind shear, directly overhead, with no large-scale forcing to move it on. The SPC's forecast soundings for the stalled boundary show an unstable, uncapped environment with vertical shear between 30 and 40 knots. Unstable, uncapped. With 30 to 40 knots of deep layer shear. The NWS Little Rock issued a formal severe weather outlook for Friday, April 24th, covering a large portion of Arkansas, with scattered strong to severe thunderstorms expected from Friday afternoon into Friday night, explicitly stating that all severe hazards appear possible, meaning tornadoes, damaging winds, and large hail each carry a real and independent threat potential. The severe weather probability map for Friday shows a 15 to 29% zone covering most of western and central Arkansas, with a 30% or higher zone across the far western portion of the state near the Oklahoma border. Cities across the entire state, Fayetteville, Fort Smith, Russellville, Conway, Hot Springs, Little Rock, Arkadelphia, Texarkana, all sit within the current risk footprint. And forecasters specifically noted that the westward shift of the latest SPC risk area does not remove eastern Arkansas from consideration. Friday's stalling front is the mechanism that allows the atmosphere to deliver severe weather to communities that have had relatively little warning-intensive weather this spring on a day when Thursday's exhausted emergency responders across the central corridor are still cataloging damage and restoring services from the previous afternoon. Now account for what happens after Friday. Because the SPC's Day 4-8 discussion from April 20th contains a line in its Day 6 section that deserves more attention than it is currently receiving. By Saturday, the larger scale flow across the southern plains will begin to respond to a low-latitude trough moving into southern California by once again becoming increasingly southwesterly. A new trough, moving into southern California on Saturday. And the long-range tornado probability data, initialized Sunday night, April 19th, published before this week's systems had even fully organized, was already flagging a 2-day tornado and severe storm threat for April 26th and 27th, targeting the southern plains and Arkansas corridor on Sunday, April 26th, before pushing into the deep south and Tennessee Valley on Monday, April 27th. The core of the probability area for April 26th is concentrated across Arkansas, Oklahoma, and the surrounding southern plains region. The April 27th risk is notably larger and further east, pushing tornado potential into Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Louisiana. Back-to-back days, following the Thursday-Friday outbreak, with a new low-latitude trough providing the atmospheric forcing. The pattern is not releasing after Friday. It is cycling. The Dixie Alley dimension of what is building for the end of this week and the beginning of next week is the element that most of the public-facing coverage has not yet focused on, and it is the one that carries the most serious human consequences per degree of atmospheric instability. Dixie Alley is a term coined by National Severe Storms Forecast Center Director Alan Pearson after witnessing a tornado outbreak that killed 121 people across the lower Mississippi Valley in 1971. It describes the corridor stretching from eastern Texas and Arkansas across Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, and Kentucky, a geography where tornadoes are less frequent than the Central Plains, but historically more deadly, for 3 specific and documented reasons. First, Dixie Alley tornadoes are more likely to be rain-wrapped, obscured from view by surrounding precipitation, making them nearly impossible to see before they strike. Second, the terrain across much of this corridor is hilly and wooded, with limited visual range, meaning the average warning lead time a community actually benefits from is shorter than in the open plains, even when the radar-based warning is issued on schedule. Third, and most critically in the context of the current population distribution, the population density of Dixie Alley is roughly 3 times higher than traditional Tornado Alley. Nashville, Memphis, Birmingham, Little Rock, and Shreveport are cities of meaningful size sitting directly in the path of what the analog data is now placing at 50 to 70% probability of severe weather between April 24th and 27th. The analog data with 60 to 70% probability is concentrated across Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, and Kentucky. A broader 40 to 60% zone extends into Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Louisiana, Georgia, and the Western Carolinas. And the Cabarrus Weekly Analysis, reporting on this pattern, specifically noted that the Tennessee Valley and broader Dixie Alley corridor has experienced a mercifully quiet, severe weather season in 2026 so far, and that the incoming pattern change is expected to end that quiet stretch dramatically. The phrase mercifully quiet carries an implication that deserves to be stated plainly. It means the communities of Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, and surrounding states have been watching the April outbreak devastate Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, and Missouri from a position of relative safety, a safety maintained by the persistent ridging that kept organized storm setups away from the Deep South through most of March and April. That ridge is now breaking down. The analog data from multiple forecasting systems initialized over the past 72 hours is showing agreement on a pattern shift that moves the active severe weather corridor from the Central Plains southeastward into Dixie Alley across the last week of April. The same communities that were watching the news coverage from Lena, Illinois, and Ringgold, Wisconsin, are now looking at severe weather probability data pointing at their own cities with 50 to 70% confidence. They have not been in the active zone all spring. They have had time to observe, but not the accumulated physical and psychological fatigue of the communities that have been on the receiving end of round after round since February. That fresh exposure, on the opening side of a multi-day outbreak that the atmosphere is already loading for Thursday and Friday and extending through Sunday and Monday, is the specific kind of situation where awareness matters most and lead time is most valuable. The NWS has this event in its outlook. The SPC has this event in its Day 4 or 8 discussion. The analog data has the probability already quantified. The window between now and Thursday afternoon is the preparation window. After that, what the atmosphere delivers into a 3-day outbreak across the plains, a stalling front over the Arklatex, and 50 to 70% analog probabilities across Dixie Alley for April 24th through 27th, is determined entirely by the physics of a pattern that has been described by professional meteorologists covering 2026 with a single word they do not use carelessly: generational.